He said it was one night. 21 days on Glacier Peak. Search and rescue pulled him off the northwest ridge at 8,200 feet on a Tuesday morning in October. Frostbite on 6 fingers, both ears, the tip of his nose. 23 pounds under his listed weight. Blood work so off the lab flagged it as a possible instrument error. He was alive. Barely. 21 days. He said one night. I caught the case because nobody else wanted it. Warren Cole handed me the file on a Thursday afternoon with his coat already on and one foot aimed at the parking lot. Altitude sickness, he said. Confusion. Maybe a head injury nobody'd found yet. Talk to the guy, write it up, close it out. Sean Voss was supposed to ride along, but a domestic hearing ran over, so I took the drive alone. 40 minutes from Darrington to Cascade Valley Hospital. The road follows the Sauk River the whole way. Logging trucks, gray sky sitting low on the tree line, rain that thinned out for a mile and came back heavier. I parked and sat in the car, watching water crawl down the glass. The file was open on the passenger seat. 3 pages, missing person report, search and rescue summary, preliminary medical. I'd read it twice already, nothing in there worth a Thursday afternoon. I went in anyway. The hospital smelled like floor cleaner and old coffee and something under both you learn to ignore. A woman at the front desk pointed me down the hall and paged a nurse, Diane Bain, 50s, short hair, reading glasses on a lanyard, the unhurried walk of someone who'd been pulling 12-hour shifts since before I had a badge. She stopped me about 20 feet from the room. He hasn't slept. I asked how long. Since they brought him in, 2 days. I asked if they'd offered him something. We tried. He won't take it. Says he doesn't want to close his eyes. Just something she thought I should know before I walked in there. Down the corridor, a heart monitor beeped at steady intervals. Nobody was responding to it. She opened the door. Ben Hadley was sitting in a chair by the window. Not the bed. He'd dragged the chair away from the wall and pointed it at the door. His hands were on the armrests, and his eyes found me before I'd finished stepping through. He looked wrong. The weight loss had pulled his face tight over the bone, cheekbones too close to the surface, lips cracked deep enough to bleed. He kept running his tongue across the lower one, like he didn't know he was doing it. The frostbite dressings on his hands were clean, but his fingers shook non-stop. Small tremors, the kind that don't stop when you tell them to. His eyes were the thing, not bloodshot, not glazed. I've seen plenty of people after 2 days without sleep, and it never looks like this. These were just open, fixed, locked on whatever was in front of him, like looking away meant letting something get behind him. The bed was made, sheets tucked tight. He hadn't touched it. The room had the stale, warm air of a space someone's been sitting in too long without moving. I pulled the other chair over and sat across from him, set the recorder on the rolling table between us. Red light. I told him I needed to walk through what happened up there. Standard procedure. Wouldn't take long. He almost smiled. The skin around his mouth cracked when he did. Nothing happened, he said. That's what I keep telling everyone. I asked him to start from the beginning. Ben Hadley was not a weekend hiker. He'd summited Denali twice, Rainier more times than he could count. 2 full seasons in the Himalayas above 20,000 feet. Glacier Peak was a tune-up, a solo conditioning climb before a Patagonia expedition he had booked for January. He needed his legs and lungs back after a summer off. He'd done the route before, knew the mountain cold. Drainage patterns, ice conditions, weather windows. Packed for 5 days, filed his itinerary at the ranger station in town, and started up the Sitcombe Glacier approach on a Monday. Day 1 was clean, clear sky, firm ice, no wind. He made the 6,000-foot camp by early afternoon, radioed base he was ahead of schedule, and ate dinner watching the sun drop behind the valley. Light on the glacier went pink, then blue, then gone. He crawled into his bag and slept hard. Day 2, the weather changed. The forecast said the front would arrive that evening. It came 8 hours early. By noon, the wind was gusting past 60 and the temp had dropped 30 degrees in 2 hours. He said you could taste it before it arrived. A metallic edge on the air. The kind of thing that means get low and get covered. He dug in at 7,500 feet on a flat shelf of ridge, drove his stakes, anchored the guy lines, sealed the vestibule, fired his stove, ate something that tasted like salt and cardboard, checked the gear, checked the stakes by feel through the tent wall, looked at his watch. The storm was bad, but he'd sat through worse. Nylon snapping above him, the tent popping and bowing, wind screaming across the ridge. He lay there, and he felt fine. 100 storms before this one. The tent was solid, stakes were deep. All he had to do was wait. That's when he stopped talking. Not dramatically. He didn't tense up or grip the chair. He just paused the way you do when something in your own words catches on a detail you didn't know was there. The storm was loud, he said. He looked down at the recorder, the little red light. Actually, no. I waited. At some point it just stopped, not died down, not passed, stopped. Like someone reached over and turned it off. 60-mile-an-hour gusts and the tent walls cracking and then nothing. I could see the fabric moving. I could see snow hitting the sides. But the sound was gone, all of it. He rubbed his bandaged hands together. The gauze made a dry whisper. And I wasn't cold anymore. I asked him to explain that. I was warm. Not sleeping bag warm. Warm like July, like lying in a field. I could feel it on my skin. I remember thinking that's adrenaline, but I wasn't doing anything. I was on my back in a sleeping bag at 7,500 feet in October, and I was warm the way you get warm falling asleep in the sun. He looked at me, those wide locked eyes. I forgot about that until right now, the warmth. Haven't thought about it once since they brought me down. Not once in 2 days, it just came back. I wrote it down. Altitude, I told myself. Hypothermia scrambles memory. The body gets cold enough and the brain starts filing things in the wrong places, mixing signals, burying details where you can't reach them until something jars them loose. I wrote it down and underlined it, and every word of the explanation I was building made sense. All of it. He went on. At some point, he unzipped the tent and looked out. He had no reason to. The storm was still going. He could see snow flying sideways through the beam of his headlamp, thick and fast, catching the light like static. But the sound was gone. The wind, the ice on nylon, his own breathing. All of it. That's when he saw the figure, above him on the ridge, maybe 600 feet, standing in the open. No tent, no shelter. Just a shape, upright and still in the middle of a blizzard that should have put a person on the ground. His first thought was someone in trouble. A day hiker who'd gotten caught above the tree line without the right gear. It happens. People underestimate the Cascades. He'd seen it before. 2 years ago on Rainier, he'd carried a man down on his back after the guy's legs quit above Camp Muir. I couldn't leave someone out there, he said. You don't do that. He geared up, hard shell on, harness clipped, boots laced with fingers already going stiff. Grabbed the ice axe. The whole time the figure didn't move. He kept checking through the tent flap while he dressed. Same spot, same position, facing away. He stepped out and started climbing toward it. That's where the memory goes clean and steady and then drops away into nothing. He remembers snow compacting under his crampons, the weight of the axe, the strap cutting into his glove. The figure above him, still not moving, still turned away toward the summit, shoulders set against wind it didn't seem to feel. Then he was face down on bare rock at 8,200 feet with search and rescue kneeling over him and a foil blanket being pressed against his back, 700 feet higher than his camp. 21 days later, tent gone, pack gone, stove, food, sleeping bag, radio, everything. Just him and the clothes on his back and a harness worn down like it had been loaded hard every day for a month. One night, that's what he had. I turned off the recorder, told him we'd pick it up tomorrow. He nodded. He didn't look relieved. He looked like he was still up there. I drove to Darrington in the rain, sat at my desk and filed the notes, the warmth, the silence, the figure on the ridge in a blizzard, wrote it all down in the same flat language I use for everything. I didn't believe him yet. That was the last time I could say that. I remembered something last night. He said it before I was through the door, facing me, and the tremor in his hands was visible from the hallway. 3 days without sleep. Diane Bain had told me at the nurse's station. He'd dozed off around 2 a.m. for maybe 20 minutes, woke up screaming. Wouldn't say why. I pulled the chair over, sat down, recorder on. "After you left yesterday," he said, "I was sitting here going back through it and things started coming back, pieces, one at a time." He looked at the window behind me, rain on the glass. Not like a dream, slow, but real. I asked what he remembered. He'd been walking toward the figure in the storm. We'd covered that. But what he didn't have yesterday, what came back in the hours after I left, was the middle, about 100 meters out, close enough to see details through the snow. The figure standing with its back to him, same as before, but now he could make out what it was wearing. The clothes were wrong. Not wrong like bad planning, not a hiker who'd underpacked. Wrong like someone who'd never seen a mountain. Flat-soled shoes, thin dark jacket with no insulation, the kind of thing you'd wear to dinner. No hat, no gloves, no pack, no goggles, no gaiters, nothing. At 7,500 feet in a blizzard in October, he shouted. Standard rescue protocol. Said he was a climber. Said he was coming to help. The figure didn't turn around. He shouted again, louder, braced his legs, cupped his hands around his mouth. The effort made his lungs burn. Then something happened. He stopped talking, looked at his bandaged hands, turned them over. It moved its head. The room went quiet, just the rain, the red light. Barely, just barely, toward me, not the body, the head, maybe 2 inches. The way you'd nod at someone across a room without breaking what you were doing. I asked if it turned to face him. No, a fraction, toward me, then back. If I'd blinked, I'd have missed it. He went quiet. His hands settled. It knew I was there. It heard me, and it chose to keep facing the other way. 60-mile-an-hour gusts slamming into the ridge, and it stood there the same way you'd stand in a parking lot on a calm day. 30 feet. The warmth came back. Same as the tent, but stronger. A lot stronger. I was sweating inside my shell. Actually sweating. Goggles fogged. I could feel the heat trapped under my layers against my skin, and all I could think was, something is wrong with me. I could see my breath, big clouds of it, thick. He stopped. I looked at the figure, 10 feet away, looked for the same thing, breath, vapor, anything. Longer pause. Nothing, no breath, no condensation, nothing coming off it at all. I asked what he made of that at the time. I didn't. I was still in rescue mode. Someone's in trouble, you get to them. You don't stop and think about whether they're breathing. He closed the last of the distance. Arm's reach. He described the back of the figure's head. Dark hair, cut short, flat against the skull, not moving. In 60-mile-an-hour gusts, everything moves. Hair moves, fabric moves, anything loose catches wind. This didn't. Still. He described the jacket up close. Thin, dark fabric. No brand, no zipper pull, no hood. The fabric was dry, in a blizzard that had been dumping snow for 6 hours. No accumulation on the shoulders, no ice in the hair, no moisture anywhere on it. Dry. He reached out his hand. I remember my arm going forward, my glove against the white behind it. The gap between my hand and its shoulder getting smaller, inches. He looked at me. That's the last frame. I asked him to be specific. It ends there, my hand going out, the shoulder right in front of me. Then I'm face down on rock at 8,200 feet with someone pressing foil on my back and shouting my name, and my hands are gone. 700 feet higher, 21 days later. 21 days. He turned toward the window. Gray light fell across the dressings on his ears. Those last few seconds. I wanted to get closer. That's the part that keeps me awake. Not what I saw, what I felt. Every reason to stop, every reason to back off, and I didn't want to. I let the silence run. I asked about other details, face, hands, height. Never saw the face. Flat. It never turned around, from the first second I spotted it to the last thing I remember. Facing away, toward the summit. Height? Tall, but I was below it on the slope. Could have been the angle. Sound? Did it make any noise? He opened his mouth, closed it. 10 seconds. His hands had stopped shaking. I noticed because they'd been going since yesterday. That constant fine tremor. Gone. Both hands resting on his knees. Still. I don't know, he said. I waited. I don't think I'm ready to answer that yet. He was looking at the floor, a spot on the linoleum between his feet. I didn't push it. I turned off the recorder. The click was loud. We sat there, rain steady on the glass, him staring at that spot on the floor. I left him there. Diane got his gear released on a phone call. Hospital security walked me to a storage room in the basement where they'd tagged his equipment at intake. I signed the chain of custody form and loaded everything into the trunk. Harness, boots, ice axe, crampons, shell jacket, rope. Everything he'd been wearing when they pulled him off the ridge. I stood at the open trunk in the rain and looked at it. Wrong. Not damaged. Not torn up from a fall. Worn. Ground down. The kind of wear that takes time. His boots had a full season of sole wear. The heels were smooth. He packed for 5 days. This gear had been used every day for a month. I drove back to Darrington and called the county lab, consistent with approximately 18 to 23 days of continuous heavy use. That was the lab report. Monday morning, I read it at my desk with a cold coffee next to me and Sean across the room working a vehicle theft with a pen that kept skipping. He'd lick the tip, write 3 words, lick it again. Morning light through the blinds, baseboard heaters ticking. I read the line again. 18 to 23 days, every piece of gear. The crampons showed sustained daily climbing on mixed terrain, rock, hardpack, ice. The axe had repeated high-impact stress from weeks of driving a pick into frozen surfaces. The rope fibers had fatigued along the same 6-inch section where his tie-in point sat, strands separating and thinning from being loaded and unloaded day after day under body weight. The boot soles were ground in a heel strike pattern that comes from long descents on rock. I printed the report, filed it. Sean asked what I had. Hadley case, I told him. The missing climber. He nodded, went back to his pen. Then the GPS data came. Standard backcountry unit. Pinged position every 15 minutes around the clock. Battery rated for 30 days. It ran for 21. 2016 data points. I opened the file. Day 1 tracked clean. Base camp to 6,000 foot camp. Straight up the Sitcom approach. Normal route. Normal pace. Day 2 showed the storm camp at 7,500 feet. He stopped around 8 p.m., matched his account. Then the data kept going. 11:47 at night, day 2. The beacon started moving, uphill, steady pace. roughly when he saw the figure and went toward it. That still made sense. It didn't stop. Through the night, through the next morning, through the next night. 21 straight days of continuous movement without a single pause longer than 40 minutes. No camp, no rest, no stop that would mean sleep or shelter. Moving. For 3 weeks. A person can't do that. The body shuts down long before day 4, but the beacon pinged every 15 minutes, and every 15 minutes he was somewhere new. The route was worse. Days 1 and 2 sat on the mountain. After that, the coordinates drifted, not off trail, off the mountain. Positions on ridgelines that don't appear on any USGS survey map. Elevations that cleared the summit by thousands of feet. Day 17. Miles north. The Forest Service calls that area unbroken old-growth canopy at 1,400 feet. The GPS said 12,100. I went through all 2016 points, satellite imagery, topo maps, Forest Service surveys, cross-referenced until my eyes burned and the coffee had a film on it, and Sean's desk was dark and the parking lot outside was black. I was alone in the station with a spreadsheet of numbers that described a route across a mountain that doesn't exist. The unit was clean, no malfunction, no signal bounce. It did exactly what it was built to do for 21 days and recorded a journey that could not have happened on the landscape as it is. I saved the file, closed the laptop, sat there listening to the clock, drove to the hospital. After 7 p.m., the hallways were dimmer at night, quieter. My footsteps on the linoleum were the loudest sound in the building. Diane wasn't on shift. A younger nurse let me in, said he'd been calm all day, not sleeping, sitting. I walked into the room. Something was different. Ben was in the chair, same spot, but for the first time since I'd met him, he wasn't watching the door. He was looking at the wall to his left, nothing on it, white paint, a scuff mark near the baseboard. He was staring at it the way you stare out a window. His hands were on the armrests. Recorder on. Red light. He didn't look at me. Something else came back, he said. I waited. I've been sitting here all weekend, trying not to think about it. Flat voice, nothing behind it. It won't stop. He turned. His eyes were different, not the wide, locked stare, narrower, drawn in. When I was walking toward it, he said. Close, last stretch, before I reached out. He stopped, swallowed. I heard the click of it. It said something. I asked what he meant. It spoke, one sentence. I heard it and I understood it. The room was still. The rain had stopped on the drive over. What did it say? He pressed his palms flat on the armrests, hard, tendons standing out in his wrists, the dirty bandages bunched at his knuckles. I don't know. I waited. I heard it. I understood it completely. The whole meaning, the whole sentence, and now it's gone. I can feel the shape of it, how long it was, where the weight fell. He looked at the floor, but the words aren't there. It's not like forgetting. When you forget something, you know it slipped. This didn't slip. It's still there. I can feel it. I just can't reach it. It's behind something. I asked when this came back. Saturday morning, closed my eyes for a second, not to sleep, and I heard it. The sound of the voice, not the words, the sound. He looked at me. I hear it every time I close my eyes, every time. That's why I can't sleep. That's what's been happening since they brought me in. I just didn't know what it was until Saturday. I sat with that. The first night, when I woke up screaming. That was the sound. I heard it and didn't know what it was, and I screamed. And every time I've closed my eyes since then, it's been there. Waiting. Eyes shut, it starts. Eyes open, it stops. Steady voice. The same sentence. Over and over. I can hear the rhythm, the length, where it rises, where it drops, everything except what the words are. I asked if it was a human voice. Long silence. Long enough, I almost repeated the question. I don't know how to answer that. I asked him to try. It sounded like a voice. It had the rhythm of one. But I can't tell you it was a person. He paused. I can't tell you it wasn't. I turned off the recorder. The click sat in the room. We stayed there. Black window, warm, stale air. He was looking at his hands. The bandages were dirty, the tape curling and peeling at the edges. He hadn't asked anyone to change them. I don't think it was talking to me, he said. Quiet, almost to himself. I asked what he meant. I think it was talking, and I happened to be there. I don't think it cared whether I heard it or not. That was the end of the third session. I drove home with the windows cracked. Cold October air off the river. The road was empty. No trucks, no headlights in the mirror. Just the 2-lane and the trees on both sides, black against a sky with no moon. Overcast. Nothing past the reach of the headlights. The GPS was on my laptop on the passenger seat. The gear report was in the case file in the back. And a man in a hospital couldn't close his eyes because something he heard on a mountain was still playing. I pulled into the driveway, cut the engine. The house was dark, porch light out. I'd left in daylight and forgot to turn it on. I sat in the car, looked at the house, the trees behind it, the road I'd come in on. All of it dark. I went inside and locked the door. That night I couldn't settle. I got home around 9, made a sandwich I didn't finish. The bread was stale at the edges, and I left half of it on the plate next to a glass of water I poured and never picked up. The house was cold because I'd been gone since morning and the thermostat was still set to daytime. I turned it up and heard the furnace kick on in the basement, that low thud first, then the blower pushing warm air through the vents. The baseboards ticked as the metal expanded. I stood there in the kitchen waiting for the air to catch up. I sat at the kitchen table with the case file open in front of me and my laptop next to it. The GPS data was still on the screen. All those numbers, all those impossible coordinates. I was going to go through them again, make notes, cross-reference with something I might have missed. The kitchen light above me had a faint flicker to it that I'd never noticed before, or never cared about. I couldn't focus. I'd read 3 lines, and then I'd stop and look up. At the window over the sink where the glass was black and I could see my own reflection sitting at the table, at the hallway, at the front door at the end of it. I kept doing it without deciding to. My eyes would leave the page and go to the door or the window, and then I'd catch myself and go back to the file, and 30 seconds later I'd do it again. The pen in my hand hadn't moved. The same word was underlined twice. The house is on the east side of Darrington, last street before the road turns to gravel and the trees start. At night it's quiet out here. You hear the furnace. You hear the fridge cycling. You hear the occasional car on the county road half a mile west, headlights sweeping through the front window and moving on. That's it. I'm used to that quiet. I've lived here 6 years. It's never bothered me. It bothered me tonight. I kept looking at the door. I kept checking the window. I got up and checked the lock again. I told myself it was the case. The GPS data and the gear report and Ben Hadley sitting in that chair unable to close his eyes. That's what was sitting on me. The case. Around 11 I gave up on the file and went to wash up. The bathroom light was harsh after the dim kitchen. I brushed my teeth and the sound of the bristles was too loud in the small tiled room. Changed, got into bed, lay there with the light off looking at the ceiling. The sheets were cool against my skin and the pillow smelled like laundry detergent. Normal. The furnace cycled off. The house went quiet, the kind of quiet where you can hear your own pulse in your ears if you hold still long enough. 3 knocks at the front door. They were firm. 3 deliberate knocks on the front door of my house on a Monday night in October at an hour when nobody comes to doors in Darrington. I got up, walked down the hall in my socks. The hallway was dark. The only light was the glow from the digital clock on the microwave in the kitchen at the far end, green numbers floating in the black. My feet made no sound on the carpet, and then the cold tile hit my soles as I reached the entryway. I got to the door and looked through the peephole. The porch was empty. The porch light was off. I still hadn't replaced the bulb, but there was enough ambient light from the sky to see the step, the railing, the first few feet of the front walk. Nobody there. The fisheye lens warped the edges, but the center was clear. I could see my car in the driveway, the road beyond it, the tree line across the street, black shapes against a slightly less black sky. Nothing moving, not even wind in the branches. I stood at the door for a long time. I don't know how long. I just stood there with one eye pressed to the peephole and my hand flat on the deadbolt, and I listened. Wind picking up in the trees across the road. Nothing else. I opened the door. I don't know why. I'd looked through the glass. Nobody was there. But I opened it anyway and stepped onto the porch in my socks, and the cold hit my face and my arms, and the hair on my forearms stood up. I looked both ways down the street. The road was empty. No car, no person, no footprints on the porch boards that I could see in the dark. The air smelled like wet pine and cold dirt. October in Darrington. I stood there until my feet ached from the cold porch boards and the goosebumps ran from my wrists to my shoulders. I went back inside, locked the door, stood in the hallway. The house felt the same as it had all evening. That weight, that pressure, same as before, worse maybe. I checked the back door, locked. I checked the windows in the kitchen and the living room, all latched. I went back to bed, didn't sleep, just lay there looking at the dark ceiling and listening to the furnace cycle on and off and on again. Each time it shut down, the house went dead quiet again. It was just past 3 in the morning when the phone rang. My cell was on the nightstand. The screen lit up the room. Unknown number. I picked it up, breathing. Not heavy, not fast, just breathing. In and out. Steady, close to the microphone. Whoever it was, their mouth was right against the phone. I said hello. The breathing continued. Same rhythm, same distance, like I hadn't spoken at all. I asked who was calling. Nothing changed, just the air going in and coming out. I sat up straighter. The sheets bunched around my waist. The phone was warm against my ear, and the room was cold and dark, and the breathing went on. I asked again. Louder. Breathing. I asked what they wanted. The breathing stopped. 1 second of silence. Total silence, not even a line hiss, the kind of dead air you get when a connection should have dropped but hasn't. I held the phone against my ear and I could hear my own heartbeat in the gap. Then a voice said Ben Hadley's name. Clear, close, not whispered, not shouted. Spoken the way you'd say someone's name to get their attention across a room. Ben Hadley. 2 words. Then the voice stopped and there was silence again, half a second of it, and I opened my mouth to speak. The sound changed, screaming, from the same phone, from the same connection. Raw and sustained, so loud I pulled the phone away from my ear. The speaker vibrated against my palm. 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 8 seconds. My hand was shaking. Then the line cut. Dead. I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark, holding the phone. The screen had gone to the call-ended display. Unknown number. Duration. 47 seconds. The room was quiet. The ringing in my left ear from the scream faded slowly into the silence of the house. I called the hospital. The night nurse answered on the 3rd ring. I identified myself and asked her to check on Ben Hadley in room 214. She put me on hold. I could hear her footsteps on the floor through the phone. rubber soles on linoleum. A door opening. A pause. She came back. He was in bed, asleep. First time he'd slept since admission. She said his vitals were normal, breathing steady. He hadn't moved. I asked if there was any way he could have made a phone call. She said no. There was no phone in the room. His personal belongings were in storage downstairs. The nearest phone on the ward was at the nurse's station, and she'd been sitting at it all night. I asked about the corridor cameras. She checked. Footage showed his door had not opened since the 10 p.m. rounds. He had not left the room. I thanked her and hung up. 3:14 a.m. I was sitting on my bed in the dark. Outside the window there was nothing but the trees and the road and the dark. The call had come from an unknown number. It had contained breathing, then Ben Hadley's name, then the sound of a man screaming. 47 seconds, and the man whose name was spoken and whose voice that may or may not have been was asleep in a hospital bed 40 minutes away and had been asleep the entire time. I put the phone down on the nightstand. I didn't go back to sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed and I waited for morning. I didn't wait long. The sun came up around 7, gray light through the bedroom window. I got dressed in the same clothes from the day before and drove to the hospital with the heat on and the radio off. The road along the river was empty, fog sitting low on the water. My wipers dragged across the glass every few seconds and didn't help much. I parked in the lot and sat there. The engine ticked as it cooled. I hadn't eaten, hadn't slept. My eyes felt dry and the skin under them was tight. I looked at my phone on the passenger seat. I went inside. The front desk was empty. Diane was at the nurse's station. She saw me coming down the hall and stood up before I got there, came around the desk. She had a piece of paper in her hand. "I need to talk to you before you go in." I stopped. "Something happened last night." She was keeping her voice low, not whispering, just below the level of the corridor. A food cart rattled past behind me. She waited for it to pass. Around 3 a.m., I was at the desk doing charting. I heard screaming from his room. I asked what kind of screaming. Short, maybe 5 seconds. Then it stopped. I went in right away. She looked at the paper in her hand, looked back at me. Her reading glasses were hanging on the lanyard around her neck, and she was gripping them with her other hand. Tight. He was sitting up in bed, eyes wide open, not moving. I turned on the light and stood right in front of him, and he didn't react, didn't blink. I said his name. Nothing. I touched his shoulder. Nothing. He was just sitting there staring straight ahead. She paused. Then he started talking. I waited. Low, steady, not loud. Like he was reading something out loud to himself, but the words didn't make sense. They weren't sentences, just words, one after another. No stops between them, no pattern I could hear. I asked how long it went on. Maybe 4 minutes. I timed it after the first 30 seconds because the protocol says to log it. 4 minutes and maybe 10 seconds. Then he stopped mid-word, lay back down, closed his eyes, asleep. Just like that, breathing normal, heart rate normal, like nothing happened. I asked if she remembered any of the words. She held up the paper. He just kept cycling through them, same words over and over. I wrote them down exactly as he said them. She handed it to me. Lined paper from a ward notebook, her handwriting, small and neat, blue ink. The words ran across the page in the order she'd caught them. 9 words, no sentence, no grammar, just fragments coming out of a man sitting up in a hospital bed at 3 a.m. with his eyes open and no one in them. I asked if he was awake now. He's been up since 6, ate breakfast, he doesn't remember any of it. I asked him this morning and he looked at me like I was making it up. She paused. His voice is hoarse. He noticed that. Didn't know why. I asked if I could keep the note. She nodded. I folded it once and put it in my jacket pocket. I didn't go to the room. I told Diane I needed a few minutes and walked back down the hall and out through the front doors and across the lot to my car. Got in, closed the door. The windshield was fogged on the outside, and I sat there looking at the parking lot through the haze. I took the note out, unfolded it on the steering wheel. I started moving them around in my head. It didn't take long. The pattern locked. I sat there for a moment. The car was cold. Then I found it. You let it in when you opened the door. I sat there. Last night, just past 11. 3 knocks at my front door. Nobody at the peephole. I opened the door anyway, stood on the porch in my socks, looked both ways. Nobody there. Went back in. I read the sentence again. 9 words on a piece of lined paper written down by a night nurse while a man who'd been missing on a mountain for 3 weeks spoke in his sleep with his eyes open. And those 9 words described what I did at my front door 5 hours ago. I folded the note, put it back in my pocket, started the car. The heat came on and blew cold air that slowly warmed. I sat there with my hands on the wheel, looking at the gray lot and the gray sky and the hospital in the rear view. I didn't go back in to see Ben. I couldn't tell you why. I just didn't. I put the car in gear and drove home. The front door was open. I saw it from the driveway. I'd pulled in and cut the engine and looked up at the house, and there it was. The door. Open about a foot, not swinging. Still. I thought about that morning, getting dressed, walking to the car, the fog. Had I locked the door? Had I pulled it shut? I went through the steps in my head and I couldn't remember. I'd been awake for over 30 hours. I'd been thinking about the note in my pocket. I could have left it open. People do that. I got out. The gravel crunched under my shoes. I walked up the steps and stood on the porch looking at the gap. The hallway inside was dark. I could see the edge of the kitchen counter, the corner of the table. The case file was still where I'd left it, pages fanned out under the dead laptop screen. No marks on the door frame, no damage to the lock, no scuff on the threshold. I went in, checked the rooms, kitchen, living room, bedroom, bathroom, back door locked, windows latched, nothing moved, nothing missing, nothing wrong. I closed the front door, locked it, put the chain on. The chain rattled against the plate and then went still. The house was quiet. Afternoon light came through the kitchen window in a hard slant across the linoleum. I could hear the fridge, a truck gearing down on the county road. I stood there and looked around, and nothing was wrong. I kept looking anyway. I made food, soup from a can. Ate it, standing at the counter, because sitting at the table meant looking at the case file, and I didn't want to look at the case file. The soup was too hot, and I burned the roof of my mouth and didn't care. I put the bowl in the sink with the plate from last night's sandwich and the glass of water I still hadn't touched. I tried to read, sat in the chair in the living room with a book I'd started weeks ago. Read the same page 3 times, put it down, looked at the front door. The chain was on. The deadbolt was turned. The gap under the door showed nothing but the porch boards and the gray light beyond. I went to bed early, before 9. The light was still gray outside. I pulled the curtains and the room went dim, and I got under the covers and closed my eyes. Sleep came fast, faster than it should have after everything. I was out before I could think about why. I woke up and the house was dark. Not the dark of early evening, the deep dark of the middle of the night. No light at the window edges, no glow from the hall. I didn't know what had woken me. I lay there, eyes open, staring at a ceiling I couldn't see. The furnace was off, the fridge was off, nothing was running. The house was completely silent. 3 knocks, from below me, from under the floor, from the basement. Faint, spaced the same way as the ones at the front door. The same rhythm, the same gap between them, but softer, muffled by the floor and the joists and the carpet under my bed. I felt them as much as heard them, a vibration in the mattress springs. I didn't move. Silence. Long enough that I started to think I'd dreamed it. 3 knocks, same spot, same rhythm, same spacing, directly below the hallway. The basement stairs are at the end of the hall. The door stays closed. I keep the laundry down there and the water heater, and that's it. I don't go down there at night. There's no reason to go down there at night. My hands were flat on the mattress, my fingers pressed into the sheet. I was holding my breath without meaning to. 3 knocks, a third time. I got up. My feet hit the carpet. I stood there in the dark in my socks and a t-shirt, and the air on my arms was cold. The hallway was black. I reached for the light switch by the bedroom door and turned it on. The hall lit up. Carpet, walls, the bathroom door on the left, half open, the basement door at the far end, before the kitchen, closed, the way I'd left it. I walked down the hall. The carpet was soft under my socks, and the light behind me threw my shadow long ahead of me on the wall and the floor. No furnace, no fridge, no wind outside, just the hall and the door at the end of it. I got to the basement door. White paint gone yellow at the edges, brass knob. I put my hand on it. The knob was cold, colder than the air. I opened the door. The stairs went down into the dark. Wooden steps, the edges worn smooth. I could see the first 4 or 5 where the hall light reached. After that, nothing. Black. Cold air came up from the bottom, and I could feel it on my ankles and the tops of my feet. It smelled like concrete and dust. I reached for the light switch on the wall just inside the door frame. My fingers found it, and I clicked it. The following is a transcript of a local news broadcast that aired on Prior 5 News, Skagit Valley, Washington, 6 days after the events described above. Darrington police are asking for the public's help in locating one of their own this evening. Investigator Ray Hollis, 41, has been reported missing after failing to report for duty for 3 consecutive days. Colleagues raised the alarm Wednesday morning when Hollis did not respond to repeated calls or appear at the Darrington station. Officers conducted a welfare check at his home on the east side of town. The house was empty. His vehicle was parked in the driveway. His wallet, keys, and phone were found inside the home. The front door was standing open. The last known footage of Hollis comes from a residential security camera belonging to a neighbor approximately 200 yards down the road. The footage is time-stamped 3:14 a.m., Saturday, October 19th. It shows Hollis leaving his home through the front door. He is wearing socks and a t-shirt, no shoes, no jacket. The temperature at that hour was 38 degrees. He walks down his driveway at a normal pace, turns left onto the road, and walks calmly toward the tree line at the eastern edge of town. He does not stop. He does not look back. The search has focused on the forested area east of Darrington, including portions of the Mount Baker Snoqualmie National Forest. Search and rescue teams with dogs have been deployed daily since Thursday. Conditions have been difficult due to heavy rain and low visibility at elevation. So far, no trace of investigator Hollis has been found. Anyone with information regarding his whereabouts is asked to contact the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office. That's where I'll leave you tonight. I'm Rex, and I'm glad you're here. If you want to keep this going and officially join the Nocturnal crew, subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got plenty more stories to share with you. I read every comment, so don't be shy. Stay safe, and I'll be back before the sun comes up.